Hello, welcome to Art Rant, and today I'm going to tell you how to expand your gouache palette. So before I start, this is what I mean by expanding your gouache palette. Here are some swatches that I did using the MIYA HIMI Gouache 24 color palette. So basically what I do is I work with a base layer in gouache, and then I use color pencil to layer on top and get those more brighter, saturated, and complex colors. Because if you keep layering and layering and layering gouache over and over again, it just becomes like a velvety, muddy mess. So if you go in on top of the color pencil, you're gonna expand your color palette like 100 times. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you my technique and how I approach layering gouache from an oil painting, indirect painting kind of mindset. And in indirect oil painting, you are looking to work in layers and create those optical grays and those optical mixtures that you cannot get just by mixing a color. And to simplify, the way that it usually works is you will do almost like a sepia color underpainting, which is like a drawing of whatever it is you are going to paint in oil, like a raw umber or a sienna. And then once that layer is dry, then you go over on top and you basically color in the monochromatic drawing using more transparent pigment so that you can still see the structure underneath, but you have now the color. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do here with gouache. And basically I'm gonna show you how this works with different colors. And I'm gonna speed this up because this is gonna take forever. But basically what I'm doing is just swatching every color except for the white from the palette, and then once that's dry, I'm gonna go in over with the color pencil and show you just the infinite, like endless range of colors that you can get from just gouache and color pencil. Alright, so now I'm gonna let this dry because this has to be dry all the way. Otherwise, if you use a color pencil on damp paper, the paper is just, it doesn't matter if it's 100% cotton, you're still gonna tear up the paper. So make sure to let this under layer dry first before going over it on top with color pencil. Alright, so I'm gonna come back when this is fully dry. Okay, so everything is dry. Just gonna move everything that we don't need out of the way, because now we're gonna use color pencils only. Okay, so here I have some really bright colors, and then here I have the grays. And the grays are kind of where the real magic happens, because on such a bright background, they actually don't stay gray. So when I was first kind of playing around with this, I think it's always easier to start monochromatic. So if we have a pink here, and then if you layer pink on top, like that is a neon color that you would never be able to get with gouache. Like that is a fluorescent color. The way that pigments work with different mediums, I feel like with gouache you can only get so bright of a pink. But if you start to layer different mediums on top of it, like with color pencil or maybe acrylic, you can expand that dull color range to more brights, to where in comparison to this bright neon pink color, this almost looks like a dull gray pink. Okay, so let's see if we do the same thing with the neon over the yellow. We get like a day glow neon effect that you wouldn't be able to get with just plain gouache. Even if you got like the neon gouache, somehow the oil wax base of the color pencil holds the pigment in a more transparent way so that light can, because what's happening is you have the pigment on white paper, so you have light coming through, it bounces through the different color, almost like a color filter, and then bounces back at you. So when you are using a wax-based medium, you get more saturation, more of that kind of waxy, buttery, oily, in a way glass-like surface that reflects the light and more pigment back into your eye, which you wouldn't get with just a basic, like a velvety gouache kind of matte thing that the color doesn't really bounce back at you with. But at the same time, gouache is amazing because it really holds the pigment of wax-based pencils. It's so matte and velvety that it almost holds the pigment better than regular paper, which becomes kind of grainy. But because the paper already has kind of that powder pigment it really grabs onto the color pencil waxy color so strongly. Okay, so here let's do a darker color. And so far we've only done monochromatic combinations, but let's try it on a complementary color. So you see how you can kind of get those optical grays by layering the color pencil over the complementary, and this is the same as oil painting for me. And then let's try some more of the neons. And this expands the color range so much, like there is no way that you will be able to get this much saturation from gouache to where the other gouache pigment underneath it becomes like a neutral. And let's try it on the complementary. And it's so fun just to play with different colors and see how the base gouache changes the whole color completely. Like here against the pink, it becomes like really neon, probably the brightest one out of all. Then against an orange, it blends in, but it's still a medium tone. And then here against the complementary, against the blue tone, it becomes almost like warmer, like a burnt sienna-ish color, even though off the paper it's actually neon. Alright, so let's try it with the blue. This is kind of like a turquoise blue. And look at how on a more saturated background it becomes almost like a gray color, even though it's actually light blue in comparison. So this is what I mean by you can use other mediums and make them portable so that you don't have to take your oil paints everywhere with you, because this is the same indirect painting principle, just done in a more convenient and clean and portable way so that you can actually do studies for your oil painting in other mediums. Okay, so let's try a green now as well. And look at how the gouache base completely changes the color that is on top. If you go outside the border, you see that it's really kind of an in-between, not warm, not cool color, but against this cool base, it becomes really yellow. And here it's a light, but then against the really light yellow, kind of like a chartreuse base, it becomes a darker green color. And then let's try the green against its complementary. And the fun part about this is you can actually draw and work out the structure of your subject matter with color pencil better than you can with paint. Like if I were to do mini studies in oil paint, it would be much more challenging to do to understand the actual structure of what it is I'm drawing. But if you're using color pencil, it almost does it for you. And then again, look how dark that same green looks against this base. Okay, so the colors, they're fun. You just have to kind of play around and see what combinations actually look like your subject matter. But now let's try the white. And basically, depending on the strength of your color pencil, I have like, this is probably the best white pencil you can get, but it gives you such a huge range of colors. It basically tints the gouache that you have underneath to a much lighter color, and you can get really beautiful highlights using the white on top of the gouache. So right now I've kind of kept everything really chromatic and really bright, but this is where I feel like the real magic happens when it comes to using this method, is actually when you layer gray pencils on top of the really bright chromatic colors. So here I have a cool gray pencil, which just on regular paper is just kind of like a light to mid gray. But when you layer it on top of really chromatic bright colors, it's not really gray anymore. It takes on the property of the color that's layered underneath. Like against the brown, it'll look like a very pale, cool, bluish, light white kind of color. And look at how dark it looks against its complementary, which is a yellow. And this is a great exercise for anyone just learning about color theory and how surrounding colors affect the color that you are drawing with. Because against one background, this cool gray is going to look one color, like a very neutral kind of purplish color. And then against its complementary but a lighter color, it's going to look like a darker mid-tone gray. So this is actually my favorite combination. The bright colors, they're fun, but if you use a really bright gouache base and then layer the grays on top, you can get beautiful realistic effects. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that when I show you some of the finished pieces that I did using this layering technique at the end of the video. And this is a warm gray, and look at how it looks cool against a warmer background, but then against a cooler background, it's gonna look completely different. Look at that, how it almost makes like a brownish pink color. The Himi paints, they're basically beginner paints, but this is such a cost-effective way that you can expand even the most beginner gouache set to give you such a huge range of colors that you wouldn't even be able to mix straight out of the tube. So here, let's take a blue grayish color. Look at how it becomes kind of like a gray purple against the blue, and how dark it is against its complementary. And then if we take it and layer it over the black, it becomes like a light cool gray. And then let's take a warm gray, and look at how against the green it almost becomes like a greenish gray. So if you find your gouache getting kind of muddy and you're really losing the chromatic saturation in your work, just go and get some color pencils, and you can really don't give up on your drawing. If the color is not working, it's okay, you can always scrap the drawing later. Just get some color pencils. You don't need many, just get like a couple and try to go back into the drawing and find the structure of the objects, and just relax, just think like basic, warm, cool, light, dark, and try to go back into a drawing with a color pencil and really rework some of the drawing that just got washed away by blended gouache. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some of my drawings that I did using this layering method. Okay, so as promised, here are some of the drawings that I did using this layering method. So I did this one using that same principle of first working in grays and then some of the brightest colors that I have in the gouache palette, and then going over it on top just like we did, but using a neon color pencil. And it expands your color palette so much. And lately I've been really thinking about the optics of neon colors and how to depict neon saturation, because at some point you just run out of color brightness. Those day glow colors, you just kind of can't mix them using standard gouache. But when you layer color pencil on top, you can really push and pull those kind of bright saturated colors, and you can bring them forward by surrounding them with neutral darker colors. And just because I'm working mostly in neon right now doesn't mean that you can't use that same gouache as a base layering method. This drawing is bright, but it's not neon day glow bright. There's only maybe a couple moments of real neon saturation. So you can still get a very lifelike and realistic effect by layering gouache under color pencil. Especially if you have experience with indirect oil painting method, you're going to be able to get very lifelike effects and a very crisp drawing with color pencils over gouache. Because a lot of times what makes something look lifelike and realistic is that precise line work that a drawing in pencil creates, which is much harder to do with a liquid medium like gouache or oil paint, especially on a smaller scale. But a color pencil over gouache, it's one of my favorite mediums at the moment. So if you're just getting into gouache, and if you got the basic whatever, like a 10 or 12 color palette, try this out. You're gonna get such a huge range of colors, and you're gonna be able to preserve that drawing underneath and really go back and add shadows and highlight and rework things and keep your drawing very saturated but also very lifelike with that line work. And I'll probably make more videos on this method later on, because there's so many more variations to this technique. You can start with a color pencil drawing and then thinly layer gouache on top and have that waxy layer peek through underneath. You have kind of limitless combinations when working in this method. So I'll probably make more videos just to share other gouache and color pencil tips that I've kind of figured out along the way. Because gouache and color pencil can give you beautiful and lifelike results, almost like an oil painting. But at the same time, the medium is really underrated and people see it as more of like a craft kind of thing. But I think the more you practice and the more you learn, you can really elevate even gouache and color pencil drawing to like a fine art painting level if you're thinking about the color and the layering in a traditional painting way.